and welcome again to another episode of Fikava Vet Chat. We go to the UK today to visit a charity, a veterinary charity that is looking after the pets of homeless people. And with me is one of the co-founders of this charity, Jade Statt. So hello and welcome to Fikava Vet Chat, Jade. Hi.
Hi, thanks very much for having me on.
Yes, thank you very much. It's so that you are not only the co-founder, but you're also the clinical director and you're also a brand ambassador for StreetVet.
Yeah, like a full title.
Yes, yeah, all these positions.
Yeah, indeed.
So, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview. And I mean, for those of us who are working in the UK, we have all heard about sort of StreetVet, but for our continental listeners and viewers, I think this is a very, very interesting concept that might actually sort of be of a lot of interest for colleagues abroad as well.
Yeah.
So can you first tell me a little bit about sort of your background and before we go then into StreetVet? So you're a veterinary surgeon. Where did you study?
I qualified into Glasgow Vet School in 2002, so 20 years qualified. And yeah, I just went straight into small animal practice. Always been a small animal vet, so generally I locumed a little bit, but mostly in clinical practice. I did it's another charity very close to my heart, but I was a director for Vet Life, so the mental health charity in the UK for vets. And other than that, just I guess very interested in wanting to volunteer. Always had that in my mind, that I wanted to volunteer and give back my skills, but found it something that wasn't that easy to do in the UK at the time. Obviously, you can hop on a plane and go abroad and do things through the Worldwide Veterinary Service and that kind of volunteering. But I was kind of decided that I wanted to do it in the UK. But that was just in the background. And then StreetVet happened. So
So how did that start? Did you start that in Scotland or
No, I started it in London. So I moved down to London, was in London for about 14 years. Qualified Glasgow, but immediately started working down south. And it was, I like to say, a beautiful accident, to be honest. It wasn't planned, as none of these things really are. But I was going through a bit of a rough time with my own dog. He was diagnosed with cancer, and I guess I approached most of my veterinary decision making with what would I do if it was Oakley, so that was my dog's name. And I was out on the street on a night out, and I met a homeless gentleman called Dave and his dog called Brick, which I think is a great name. But it was just in talking to him and seeing what an amazing sort of relationship they had and how worried he was about this dog. It didn't have anything seriously wrong. It just had itchy skin, but he was, just beside himself with responsibility as to how he was going to get this dog the treatment that it needed. And I guess in my brain at the time and what was going on with my dog, I'd spoken to like 10 oncologists, he'd had all the treatment he could have. And I just was like, oh my God, like, what would I do if I was in your position? And that was Oakley. And I felt a bit ignorant, to be honest, because I'd never really thought about how people experiencing homelessness accessed veterinary care. Because I don't know what it's like in other countries, but certainly in the UK, it's not uncommon to walk past someone experiencing homelessness that has a dog. We've all done it, and especially in some of the bigger cities. And I just walked away really frustrated because I was just like, if I had what I needed in my bag, I could have, taken away that stress for him and, treated the dog's skin, and that would have made such a massive impact on his life for something that would be fairly, in my head at the time, straightforward to do. So yeah, that was my catalyst for StreetVet. So I went away from that thinking, okay, what do I need to do to make, how do I do this? How do I do this and still be within guidelines and the college support it and insurance and all the things that you have to think about. So yeah, it wasn't immediate. It obviously, as you can imagine, it takes time to get all the right things achieved. But by Christmas, so that was in like summer 2016. So by about Christmas time, I was out in the street treating dogs.
And how did you do that? How did you do that? Say, where did you get the medication? Where did you get the equipment from your own practice, or?
No, I mean, I never owned a practice, so I was always an assistant in a practice. So it was a case of at the beginning, whoever, I was just lucky enough that somebody who answered the phone, because I phoned around all the major charities in the UK at the time. They were interested in exploring what it was I was suggesting doing. So that happened to be the Blue Cross in the UK in London. And so when I this is before I met Sam, so my co-founder, I was kind of, I guess, a representative where I would go out and assess eligibility on the street. So I was kind of under the umbrella of the Blue Cross at the very, very beginning. So the medication and all of that was sourced through them, and also the out of hours was through them. And then before long, to be honest, it was fairly clear that the need was a lot bigger than just me wandering around with a backpack on. And there was an article, I think we were on the news, something happened that made it kind of spiral, and we ended up getting so many people emailing in, vets and nurses, saying, we need this where I live, how can I do what you're doing? So it didn't take long, so that was 2016. In 2017, in April 2017, we became a not-for-profit, and I met Sam in between those two times. Heard about him, he was going out with a backpack on, also in London. And we met up and we're like, we need to do, this is bigger than me, this is bigger than you, let's, see if we can do this together. So it didn't take, again, long before we realized that although the Blue Cross have been super helpful and they still help us now, that actually we needed to be an independent charity in our own right, because the thing about StreetVet is we've had to be so agile and flexible, and whereas, as you probably know, but if you're in a big charity like the Blue Cross or PDSA, or decision making takes a long time, and we were just being outstripped by the need. So we really kind of, we went out on our own really, and then applied to be a charity, and became a charity in January 2019.
I mean, for those who are not working in the UK, just to explain, I mean, it's so that obviously the most practices are privately funded, and in most cases, because veterinary medicine is not cheap, a lot of pets over here are insured. So because of that, sort of, it's not cheap to get veterinary care in the UK. An alternative or of some help is charities like Blue Cross, the PDSA, RSPCA also, who run some clinics, but they are not always available. And the problem is also to get treatment there, you often have to prove that you have a need. And it's also very often so that with homeless people, sort of they might think, or they might know, yes, there are these clinics, but they not necessarily go to these places. So what you do is sort of you go actually out in the evening or at night, I don't know when, or also during the day, I don't know. So with a backpack, with equipment, and you treat your patients actually on the spot, wherever somebody who is homeless is at the moment sort of staying or sitting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so again, steepest learning curve of my life, but in terms of why, because as you rightly said, so PDSA, RSPCA, Blue Cross, they exist to help people. And it's not to say that if somebody experiencing homelessness turned up at one of these clinics to ask for help, that they wouldn't be helped. But there's so many barriers for them in doing that. So one is, that slightly intimidation factor of actually turning up and having to prove you're homeless, because you don't, they'll ask for benefit, or they'll ask, and they don't have it. If they're staying in a hostel, then they may have benefit because they've got some address that they can write down. But if they're actually sofa surfing or sleeping in a tent, rough sleeping, they have nothing to prove that they're homeless. So that's the biggest barrier, because how do you prove it? So what StreetVet is about essentially was removing that issue, because we were able to assess eligibility because we were physically within the community and we were working with other organizations. So whenever we set up a StreetVet, we work with grassroots organizations, so soup kitchen or something like that. So we don't advertise where we are. We don't talk about it. It's a known thing within the community. But I think, other reasons why our clients struggle to go into a veterinary clinic is also a lot of them have got quite severe mental health, anxiety, social anxiety, fear of being asked for a donation that they don't have, like a bit of shame, so we kind of thought, well, the best way to overcome that is really about making them feel as comfortable as they can by getting to know us. So that's why StreetVet, we don't, it's not about, if you volunteer for StreetVet, you're not going to see 30 animals in a night, but maybe that one or that two that you see, that owner's going to get to know you. And the next time you're there, and the next time you're there, until eventually they'll be like, okay, yeah, you can help my dog, or you can help me get the dog a dental, or because, yeah, it's a completely different way of vetting that I've never really thought about. Because whenever we're in practice, people bring their animals to us, right? They want help, whereas we're out there going, can we help you? And there's an immediate defensiveness, because the people we're working with ultimately are very isolated. They wouldn't be in the situation they were in if they had an amazing, network. They probably, so many other things have happened, and their trust is really hard to gain. It takes time. But when you gain it, the things that you can achieve, it might seem such a small thing to anyone else, but if we manage to microchip their dog, that's just completely changed something so important for them, that they now feel like they've done a responsible thing for their pet. So yeah, StreetVet's, it's small wins. I mean, sometimes it's massive wins, but it's the small wins that all add up, really.
So when you how do you organize with shifts? Sort of, there are sort of set working times, but you said sort of it's not so that you say, okay, at 7 o'clock in the evening, I will be at that square, and at 8 o'clock, I will be here, I will be there. It's more so that you go at random, and depending on the cases you know about, you might make your rounds through the known sites where homeless people are, or
it's very consistent. So we have got 17 locations across the UK. So each location has their own routine to fit with obviously the area that they're in. But we, as I say, will work alongside a soup kitchen. So if the soup kitchen is out every night, Monday night between 7 and 8, StreetVet will be there Monday night, 7 and 8. And some outreaches some teams will do every week. Some teams do every fortnight. Some teams do, the first Monday of every month. And it's just about being consistent and everybody around the community knowing when we're going to be there. But also when we register a client, they all get a tag that they can put on the collar of their pet, which has got a free phone 0800 number. So it doesn't cost them any money. And that's how they get in touch with us outside of that, those predetermined times that we're going to be out. So I mean, during the pandemic, like that was that was the hardest thing for us, because all of the soup kitchen stopped, so all of the continuity stopped, and we had all these people who've been relying on us for medication, food, and we didn't know how to get in touch with them. So we sent out a massive text to, but again, a lot of our clients, they don't all have phones. Some of them don't have power or battery or credit. But the calls to our 0800 number went up by over 100% during the pandemic. And that was just people being like, where are you guys? Like, I'm struggling. I don't have food. I don't have, you know. So yeah.
So, and you do that now full time for StreetVet, or do you also do another job at a private practice or
so
something?
I went full time for StreetVet in, let me get my life in order, 2018. And so somebody had to, me or Sam, somebody had to go full time. So I've been a vet for longer, so I felt that was fair. He was more at the beginning of his career, so I left to do it. And I went back to practice about a year ago, one day a week. So I always said I needed to go back because I miss it too much. So I do StreetVet every other day of the week, and I work in practice on a Monday.
Okay. But it is really so. I mean, how many StreetVet centers do you have now? I mean, it's
17.
over 10, 15. Yeah. So I mean, you can't do that just on a voluntary basis. And I think that's just not, at some point, just not possible.
I mean, the volunteers are the fuel that keeps it, you know, there.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got over 400 people, vets and nurses who are doing this around the UK. My job now is very much about, I'm in charge really of all the partnerships that StreetVet has. So with various pharmaceutical companies or you know, food companies, speaking to the vets, speaking to the veterinary practices, and doing media stuff, press stuff, all that kind of thing. And at the clinical director bit comes down to, I speak to a lot of the vets about the cases, or if any of the volunteers are worried about a case, they want to talk it through. Because with StreetVet, it's yes, absolutely, the cases are similar because we're seeing animals usually with problems exactly as you'd expect to find in general practice. But it's the, I guess, contextualized veterinary care, if you want to look at it like that. You've got to think about everything else. So the owner's abilities, the environment, and just work out what's the best thing that we can do to help both of them together, really.
How do you do that now with the medication? Are these also donations, or do you buy also now from the funds you get sort of drugs in? How do you do that with, say, recorded drugs and things like that? So opioids and things like that. How does that all work?
So when StreetVet started, it was a case of, okay, let's get some meetings. So we've got the Veterinary Medicines Directorate, so the VMD. We've also got the veterinary liability insurance people of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. So I had a lot of meetings with people just to say, right, how do I do this that it's right? And I'm not going to be putting anybody at risk, and what's the best way to do it? So it was decided that the best way to do it was for StreetVet, each StreetVet location to be a practice in its own right. So each location is registered with the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons as practice. They are hosted somewhere. So when I first started StreetVet, StreetVet London was my garage. So I had like a VMD inspection to my garage and all these things, whereas now most of the practices choose to be co-hosted. So maybe somewhere they work will be like, okay, you know, StreetVet can be co-hosted here, which basically means that that's where the drugs get delivered, and the drugs are stored. But obviously we still are in charge of our own Veterinary Medicines Directorate inspection. So I'm sure, so we have an inspection every 3 years now, 3 or 4 years, as they do in any practice, to check how you're storing their drugs, temperature control, all the things you need to do. So the other thing, obviously, is we have our own insurance. So we have obviously public indemnity and employee liability and the veterinary insurance, we have to make sure we provide out of hours care. So again, we have a triage service during the day. So we have a telemedicine service that help us in the day. And then in the evening, we have a call handlers that then divert the calls to our out of hours. So the out of hours are different, obviously, depending where in the UK they're calling from. So in answer to your question, we have 17 different accounts, and we order centrally through the StreetVet account, and then it gets delivered to whichever practice it's going to. So in terms of arrangements with drug companies, we have been just superbly supported. So I mean, I did a lot of knocking on doors at the beginning, but people have been amazing. So we get support for vaccines and different drugs. So we get quite a lot of it donated, and then the rest of it we purchase through the suppliers. And in answer to the opioid question, we don't carry any controlled drugs. That's something we don't do, because it's putting our our volunteers at risk, but also our clients, because even if they're not going to misuse it, they may run into somebody that might. So there's a no controlled drug rule with StreetVet. So obviously, if anyone needs to have something like that, they would be referred into a practice and we would fund it. And if it was like orthopedic surgery, they would stay until we were happy that they didn't need that.
Yeah, how does it work? I mean, if you go out, you have a, say you find a dog that has a pyometra or something like that, then obviously surgery is needed. So where is that conducted? How do you organize it then?
So it's now becoming well, I want to say easier, but then it's getting bigger. It's easier because so many people have heard of us now, and so many lovely practices want to help us. We've also had some really amazing support from quite a few of the corporates as well. So essentially, what I'm trying to do at the moment is build a directory of the UK practices, so that we have a map and we're like, right, that practice understands how we work. They've got our guidelines and they're happy to work with us. But that's the whole of the UK. But let's say in London, StreetVet London, they see a pile. We've got at least 5 or 6 practices that we know we can contact, and they are happy to see our patients. So we have a taxi account for pet friendly taxis. We would organize it. The owner and the pet would be funded to get a taxi if they needed a taxi. Obviously, if they can get there themselves, they will. And then we fund the treatment, and then the patient would have the surgery and be discharged back to the StreetVet team. So they would then see it for the follow-up treatments.
I visited your really really good website. So that's streetvet.co.uk. And one thing I noticed also, you have for each of your sites, you have an Amazon wish list. I think that's really clever. So whatever the team would like to have, sort of people can actually purchase through Amazon.
We did that because people were always saying they wanted to help, which is a lovely problem to have. And so what the public like to be, as any of us, we want to be something, feel like we've been something specific. So we have quite a lot of pets that need a buggy because they're geriatric and they're on the street, just to help the owner to get about. So like if we put out a plea or ask for a buggy, like honestly, the public is bought by the next day. Like people are just so amazing. So I don't know, we've got the accredited hostel scheme, which is about getting hostels to be pet friendly. So we launched that recently. But that we've just put an Amazon wish list together for our accredited hostels. And yeah, the public, I think they bought everything on it, to be honest. So we're restocking it.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's also, I think the idea is so good because it goes so quick that people say, okay, I want to help. Yeah, well, there's the Amazon wish list. You can help now. Just go in the wish list, buy something off the wish list. You have already ticked the box. You have helped.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's absolutely good. Yeah, pets in every hostel. So that is, I think, also quite important, that because that has been a hindrance sometimes, that people who were sleeping rough didn't go into hostels because their pets were not allowed. And yet, I mean, you can't, I don't know, leave your dog outside when you stay a night in the hostels.
Yeah.
So, how did you manage that, or how does that work? Sort of, because I mean, some hostels might have difficulties with pets. Some pets might possibly not do very well in hostels. I don't know.
It's quite varied, to be fair. And again, it came down to, I never really thought about it. And it was only when I was speaking to our clients and they were saying, you know, we get offered a room, and if we turn it down because we won't give up our pet, we're termed voluntarily homeless, which was something I had never even heard about. I was just like, okay, so essentially, you know, they've ticked the box that they've offered you a room, but because you won't take it because of your dog, they kind of almost feel they've, you know, done their bit with you. And I, yeah, ticked that box. And I was just like, oh my God, seriously. So I was like, okay, guys, right, we need to find out why are hostels not willing to take pets? What's the crux of this? And is there something that we can do to reassure them? So it kind of started off with things like, oh, if we gave you a crate for the room, would you take the pet? If we, you know, gave you some leads, would you, you know? And then I came across this, you probably will have heard of it, but it's the Purina Better with Pets prize. And it's a global competition where you can put in to win money for a project that enhances the human-animal bond. So I found out about it on a Friday and it had to be in by the Monday. And I was just like, right, we've got to do this. Like, this is everything that we want to achieve, is to, you know, enhance the human-animal bond by keeping our clients with their pets. So yeah, we entered and we won the money.
It was a busy weekend then, yes.
It was, I mean, the whole competition was quite a long process. It was really actually incredibly well done. And I got to meet some amazing people who were also doing projects in France and in Canada. Amazing. But yeah, so we won the funding. And that's when we were able to create the StreetVet accredited hostel scheme. So it's essentially everything that we think we could think of that will make a hostel say yes to pets. So a lot of it is due to health and safety, because I don't know if you've ever been into a hostel, but they can be quite chaotic. A lot of the time, the people who are working in them, you know, have no experience with dogs or no experience with animals. They're trying to look after the people, and then all of a sudden there's a dog in the mix. And I can understand why that would be really overwhelming. They've also maybe had something that's gone wrong. So maybe a dog that stayed before and the owner got ill and the dog was just left, or, you know, there's various things that happen, or allergies, or, you know, there's lots of things that people worry about. But so we provide training course for staff. So it's a online training, and they do 7 modules. And we, for the hostel to be accredited, we hope to get a member of staff that would be educated or trained on every shift. So it's usually, you know, a fair number of the staff that have to do it. We send out education materials to the hostel, signs, so dogs allowed here, not allowed here, always on a lead, all that kind of stuff. We've created the hostel policy. So basically risk assessments, something about breeding, something about everything, like anything that we think could come up and cause an issue is sort of dealt with in that contract. Any of the pets are offered to be StreetVet registered, obviously. So they would then get their veterinary care taken care of. They get the 0800 number. We provide food, so the food will get delivered every month to the hostel for the pet. They get a pet pack, which has got like a bed and toys and bowls and all that kind of stuff. We install a telemedicine platform in the hostel, so that they can, like, I had an emergency once call me on Christmas Day years ago, this poor like 18-year-old girl in a hostel, and the dog had, well, I didn't know this at the time, but it had a ruptured pile, and it had literally just collapsed in front of her. And she said, I've phoned everywhere, no one will help me. It's not my dog. I don't know what to do. And yeah, so I mean, I sort of said to myself at that point, like, this needs to never happen again. Like, that poor girl the poor dog, the poor owner, like if you're accepting animals into hostel, you need to have a plan. I mean, obviously we helped with that case, but it was more the fact that, yeah, just the panic, just you could just see she was probably going to quit her job the next day. Do you know what I mean? Just because it was just too much to be expected to be responsible for. And then we do boarding as well. So if an owner, which in many situations they do not look after their own health because they won't leave their dog. So I've seen so many owners that are long overdue going to get something for themselves treated because they won't leave the dog. So we offer boarding for those situations, but also if an owner was to go into rehab or something like that. So yeah, I think I gave you the 10-point scheme, I think.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, you're covering really every aspect. It's also thinking about it. There are certain points I actually didn't consider, and yes, obviously they're very, very sort of important and serious. You talked about health and safety. This is also something I was wondering. I mean, the thing is, you are going to not the best areas of the town. Then with a backpack full with medication equipment that might in itself sort of have some value, both commercial, but also then somebody who is on drugs might be very interested because they don't know what you have in the pack, but they might think, will be something in there for me. How do you handle that? How big are the teams? I think nobody is going alone.
No. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, when I first tried to get insurance for StreetVet, you can imagine that was an interesting conversation, and nobody wanted to insure it because you're talking about dogs, street, public, medication. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that it's one of the when people get in touch with us wanting to volunteer, they want to understand, do people ever feel threatened or at risk or anything like that? And I guess, I mean, when I first did StreetVet, I did go out on my own. Obviously, we do not do that now. So it's a minimum of 2 people, maximum of 4. So the thought is that someone's always with the backpack while the other person is obviously examining the dog. We do all have tablets now, so that we can, because before we would do paper and then have to transfer it to our computer system afterwards. And we were finding, just the volunteers are, their time is precious. So if they can write their notes at the time, it's easier, but they can also access the history as well. So in terms of equipment, we don't really carry anything that's particularly worth a lot. It's a refractometer, thermoscope, otoscope, that kind of stuff. But it's, I guess from a health and safety point of view, the way we work is we're always paired with an outreach team or a soup kitchen. So you're in this kind of community, and everybody looks out for everybody else. And to be perfectly honest, the times where something kicks off, it's usually between nothing to do with the vets, something going on in another area of the soup kitchen. And what I've witnessed happening multiple times is our clients are like, get away from the street vets, don't go anywhere, you guys move over here. And they actually protect us more than anything else because they value what we do and we know them, and they don't want the service not to happen. So I have never had an experience where I've been ever felt at risk. The only time, and this is the honest truth, that I've ever felt at risk was when I actually had a film crew out with me, and they were, I guess, maybe not as experienced with dealing with our clients as they maybe implied. And they did something, they shone a light in one of our clients' eyes, and he had PTSD. And what then happened was incredibly frightening. But they were like, Jade, you need to get out of the way, you need to get out of the way. And I was like, no, you need to get out of the way. I was like, you guys need to go, just leave me here with my client. I've known him for years. I'm not scared. But what's happening here is, you've triggered him in a way that, I didn't fully understand, but you guys didn't even think about. So yeah, in answer to your question, I have never felt scared of our clients, and I've never felt at risk in terms of the drugs or the medications. But we've always got to be mindful of it. We don't go out, we don't do anything, we don't go to people's rooms in hostels. It's always done, in a public area. And as I say, obviously we're never out on our own.
Yeah, and the dogs themselves, you see, I would assume that they're actually sometimes much better behaved than a lot of normal sort of dogs you might see in practice. Because I mean, what I often thought, sort of, yes, it obviously doesn't look great if a dog sort of is sitting with the owner on the street, but then on the other hand, they have 24/7 contact to their owner. They are moving around. These are often dogs that are they socialize with other dogs then as well. So they are probably, a lot of them might be actually far more balanced from a mental and from a behavioral point of view than a lot of dogs that
there's only been one study. I'd love to do another one, but they did a study in 2016, nothing to do with us, but and they compared dogs living with owners experiencing homelessness versus in secure housing, and those dogs were found to be more mentally stimulated, less likely to suffer with obesity, although I'm not sure how I agree with that, because some of our clients, their dogs get overindulged. But in comparable health was 100% what was found. But I think the biggest behavioral issues we see actually are to do with they're actually not sometimes socialized that well with other dogs, because the owners are quite isolated. So obviously people are walking past, people are engaging with the dogs. The dogs are usually amazing with people, but they're probably not as socialized with other dogs. So sometimes that's an issue. But the other thing that we're now finding more so now that we've got the hostel scheme is separation anxiety, because obviously, as you say, 24/7. And then the owners get a room and then they're able to leave the dogs safely to go and do appointments or whatever. And the dogs are, not used to it at all.
Takes room apart.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was really brilliant insight into the amazing work you do. So I mentioned already the website, so that's streetvet.co.uk. So if anybody is more interested in looking into this, or maybe UK viewers who, colleagues, vets, nurses who would like to support the work you're doing, I think that's probably a good starting point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from a volunteer, we're always looking for volunteers, because ultimately, what we ask of our volunteers is 2 hours a month. So it's one outreach essentially a month. But one outreach and having people consistently there is what makes the difference. So as I said, I think before, if you're looking to do charity work where you're going to see 20, 30, 40 dogs, StreetVet's not for you. If you're looking to do something which is going to make a massive difference to a smaller number of animals and people, and it's about building relationships. And when I talk to our volunteers now, most of them started because of the pet, and now they're just as much invested with the person as they are with the pet, because you get to know them really well. Some of them have been our clients for 5-6 years now. So so get in touch. We can obviously tell you more about it. If you are in the UK and as long as you're on the register, you can volunteer. If you don't have your own insurance, so if you're not in practice, you're in research or academia or something, we can cover you with our insurance, which was a barrier for some people at the beginning. Get in touch and we can see if you can get involved. And if you are in another country and you want to think about picking our brains, if there's a project you were thinking about starting over there, then I'm delighted to help. So we've helped some people in Italy. There's 2 brilliant projects in France that I found out when I did the Purina Better with Pets Prize. We're still in touch. There's someone doing something in Australia. There's one in Canada. So yeah.
Jade, thank you so much for speaking to me today.
Pleasure.
To all our listeners and viewers, if you would like to comment on this episode of Fikava, I was about to Fikava Street Vet, no, not quite, to Fikava Vet Chat, then please send us an email on vetchat@fikava.org. I hope to see you soon again for another episode of Fikava Vet Chat. Take care. Bye-bye.